Great to come and have a bit of a chat to everybody today. And Michael came into the hotel actually a little while ago and came in and introduced himself and talked about Creative Mornings, and I really loved the idea of it. And we were sort of chatting, and he bugged me a little bit and said, well, why don't you come and talk? And I said, yeah, maybe, but I'd love to. But I sort of tried to ignore him a little bit, and then he hit me up a few weeks ago and said, right, I've got to get you to talk. This is the date, and he sort of locked me in when I couldn't get out. And then he said, well, I want you to talk with a theme on shock. And so as Michael said, I come from a hospitality background, currently working more with brands, but hospitality is my background, from the sort of basics of being a waiter and bartender, etc., and then being involved in the brands of hospitality as well. And if you think about shock, then shock is not something you necessarily want to really associate on the face of it with hospitality. If you think about what hospitality is, it's kind of maybe almost the opposite of shock. So warmth, caring, friendliness, service, familiarity. And familiarity, I guess, is totally not shocking, because you can come into something that is familiar and you feel warm and cosy and comfortable, and shock almost is the exact opposite of that. Shock is something that's different, unexpected, challenging, and I think they're terms where you wouldn't necessarily associate with hospitality, but I think it's actually quite important to have some of those elements in hospitality, because if we think about those other words that hospitality is generally associated with, so warmth, caring, friendliness, they're lovely, and they ultimately deliver familiarity. And as Michael sort of said, I think that's a great thing to have in retrospect when you think about a hospitality venue. But if every venue was familiar, they'd all be the same. And I think in hospitality it's actually really important to add elements of shock that create your point of difference. Because if everything was familiar and the same, then really, if I said to you, where do you want to go out tonight, or where did you want to go, next week, and those ideas of those places, you need to think about a place with points of difference and what sets it apart from other places. And so a hospitality venue, while you add service, it's important actually not to be all things to all people and have a bit of a point of difference. And how do you do that? How do you bring that into a hospitality venue? So while you probably don't want to have shocking moments necessarily, I think if we look at what shock is and what sort of defines shock, it's unexpected, it's challenging, it's different, might be new. Some things might get your heart racing a little bit. That's probably not things necessarily you want to put in hospitality, but different, unique, unexpected are great things to bring into hospitality, I think. And that's where that engagement, we're in a consumer, you're either you're grabbing the attention of someone that walks into your venue. So if I think about Little Creatures years and years ago when we opened, and I got involved in Little Creatures before the venue opened, and Little Creatures first and foremost was a beer brand, but we opened a cellar door into a venue where people could come in and experience this beer. So if you think about beer 20 years ago, I don't know how many of you were drinking beer 20 years ago, but those that were through the late 80s into the 90s and all through the 90s, you think about Perth and beer, and beer was defined by a couple of things. It was, you go into a pub, you didn't ask for a brand name, you asked for super or unleaded, basically. And what we were referring to was the alcohol content. It was the only thing that we could differentiate a beer by. So you went into the Cop pub or the Roto pub and you said, I have a jug of super or a jug of unleaded. And there was not a thought of what you were drinking. Beer was beer was beer. Sure, some came from Victoria, New South Wales, Queensland, WA when we had Emu and Swan. But really you thought about what was on the outside of the package, not what was the inside. And when Little Creatures was created, it didn't create a new category of beer, it just reintroduced beer that people were drinking a long time ago. But it was a moment of a point of difference when we brought out a particular product, which was Little Creatures Pale Ale, that sort of struck a chord. And I like to think of the moments in hospitality and what we want to try and create, and I'm sort of bringing the beer industry into this, because at Little Creatures we created a cellar door where you could come in, and that in itself was quite different. We were used to going to a winery and going down south, and you see the vines and where the grapes grow, and it's pretty easy to understand, and we all had this beautiful images of people with their shoes off, shredding into grapes and squishing grapes and making wine. And you go in and you meet the winemaker. But breweries back then, or certainly 15 years ago, 20 years ago, we had no idea. There was the Swan Brewery, there was the Canning Vale Brewery. Those in Melbourne, you go to Richmond and you see the big Cebu Brewery, but all you see is a massive brick wall with a smokestack coming out. And so very little imagination or romance could come into it when thinking about a brewery, because beer was beer. We didn't even think what went into beer. It was just something we got at the pub. So what Little Creatures tried to do was, I guess, give access to that. And I always tell a great story about when we opened Little Creatures, and this comes down to a little bit of shock, if I can bring shock into it a little bit. We had all our staff start, so I was running the hospitality, the cellar door experience there, and we had staff on for a couple of weeks beforehand training. Our brewers were still making the beer, and we actually hadn't bottled any or got into any kegs, so there was none for them to try. And we had 2 weeks of pretty intensive training to get everyone up and ready to open the cellar door at Freo, the bar and restaurant. And we had this pretty young green staff, and they were all beer drinkers for sure. And then when we first got the beer into bottle, we wheeled it out, and this is after 2 weeks of them saying, us teaching them about what we're going to do and this big venue, and we're going to fill it with people, and it's going to be a great success, we hope. We opened up this beer, and everyone had been drinking New Export or VB and super unleaded. We opened up the beer, and this particular beer that we were making, Little Creatures initially, which is Little Creatures Pale Ale. Those of you that might have tried it or tried other pale ales like Feral Hop Hog, for example, when you take yourself back maybe to that first time you stepped away from drinking super unleaded into a beer that was flavoursome, characterful, had bitterness, hop characters, which are sort of grapefruit and lychee flavours if you want to get sort of wanky and technical. There's sort of moments when we opened this beer and all the guys were like, yeah, this is what we're going to do. They took their sip and there was this stunned silence. It was a shock moment because these guys had never tried a beer like this. And they were like, what the fuck is this? Is this what we're going to set this business up about? This is like, whoa. And it was different. It was challenging. And there's that moment where everyone stopped. And what I love about those sort of elements that you can put into hospitality, and I think what are really important is the elements of shock or points of difference, it stops and makes you think. And it's a thoughtful moment. And that became quite a key phrase for us at Little Creatures, to create thoughtful moments. Those moments where you stop and think about what you're doing or what you're engaging in. So each of those staff members stopped in their tracks and were like, whoa, what am I tasting? So asking themselves questions they'd never done before with beer. Beer was about the conversation you had with mates, the environment that you were in, the music that was playing, what you're going to get up to that night. But you never stopped and thought about what you were drinking. That was wine wank sort of territory where people would talk about wine flavours. We didn't want to get that wanky, but we wanted to actually introduce flavour that actually conjured thought process in people's heads. The other thing if I can bring it back into hospitality, if you have those thoughtful moments where you're challenging people's ideas of familiarity and expectation, I think you're then defining who you are and what you stand for. So this beer was a thoughtful moment. We didn't want to be everything to everybody. We wanted people to stop and think for themselves and actually question themselves, what am I tasting? Do I like it? Am I ready for this? Do I want to challenge? Am I ready to be shocked? Because that beer flavour was a shocking flavour right up front. So we wanted to bring that into our hospitality operations as well. 15, 16 years ago when Little Creatures opened, we decided no uniforms. And that, while not challenging or shocking today, was challenging back then when hospitality was very traditional in Perth. We all came from the same background, it was the same recipe, you all did the same things, we played the same music at a safe level, the lights were at a certain level, and you wore a clean, safe uniform with a name badge that told everybody who you were, and your personality was then hidden. So what we wanted to do was bring personality out in our staff, and bring that forward, and to do that, you can't have a uniform because we all choose the clothes that we wear and that defines ourselves, and we wanted our staff to bring the personality in so you can engage, that moment of engagement. Another little thing that we did, and this is one actually that was too shocking for people, bizarrely enough, and we didn't have wine glasses in the first days of Little Creatures. We decided keep it pretty rustic, We were in this old warehouse, which was once a shipbuilding yard that housed crocodiles. We kept the fences that the crocodiles were in, and in fact, little creatures. Still today, when we opened, designers and architects and people around the world came to have a look, and we're like, wow, this is fantastic. But the truth of the matter is we did absolutely nothing with the space. The fence, the walkways, that was all there. All we did was put a new floor in and got the crocodiles out. So actually what we didn't do was more important than what we did, but there's that strip back. So the space itself was shocking, because who would sit in a shed like that and eat, But we introduced tumblers instead of wine glasses to Perth. Europe, it's nothing new. Italy, you got a little rustic venues and tavernas in Greece. You just get a simple little glass, they pour the wine in, and it's about the product. But this was actually a moment that was too challenging for people, bizarrely enough. If we did it today, I think no problems. But we were so used to what was expected or familiar and not wanting to be shocked or challenged when you're going into a hospitality venue, that people would actually bring in their own wine glasses to little creatures and say, I refuse to drink out of that tumbler, this is unbelievable. And it became a moment that was too far, actually, back in those days. So shock can take you too far. While we were not wanting to be all things to all people, this was one that was just too divisive for us. And such a simple little thing, you wouldn't ever think that it would be something that would really challenge people to that regard. But I think still it's something that helped define us and what we did. While we retreated on that, we stayed with other things. And of course you want to ultimately look after people and make people happy when they come in. But you do want people to engage in your brand and actually conjure pictures up in their mind about what the experience is going to be. And while we challenged 15 years ago the beer industry with little creatures, and particularly, I guess, in a way, hospitality and what was normal in hospitality 15, 16 years ago. We also looked at the hotel industry, and I think hotel industry as a component of hospitality industry is probably the most traditional. It's run by Swiss people that love things precise, and we do things the way that they've always been done. So a hotel is a hotel. We have a guy in a top hat out the front. We have a desk where you come and check in, you walk in, you go to the lift, someone carries your bag. The room is going to be exactly the same as you experienced it anywhere else in the world. And when you're in this environment, there's nothing challenging, it's familiar. And that's terrific, because what do hotels do? Hotels ultimately provide shelter. So you need to feel safe, you need to feel cared for and loved, I suppose, in a hotel, because you're trusting a hotel with your body overnight. This is where I'm going to lay my head, this is where I'm going to sleep, so you want safety and security. But then at the end of the day, where are you? You're in yet another hotel. And when I talk to people that travel a lot, and you ask them, where do you like to stay? Ultimately, it's places that are different that have connected. And it's that moments of thoughtful moments that you need to bring back in. And we're trying to do in the hotel industry. It's nothing new, what we're doing, but I guess in Perth, it is something, and it's our further evolution. As Mike said, it's 7 years ago it might have been challenging to bring a little hotel like Alex into Perth, but I think where we're growing and where we're coming now, I think people are looking for those thoughtful moments, those points of difference, those little things that do challenge you. So what have we done at Alex to do that? We've created a hotel that doesn't necessarily follow a tradition. We wanted something with personality, with those quirks and those points of difference, and something that isn't going to be for everybody. We want to define the experience by the personality of the venue itself, not by the brand name. And in fact, that's why we called the hotel Alex as a name, because we wanted the personality to become bigger than the hotel itself. So each of us have a name, obviously. Some of us have a name that's more common than others. And if I know 5 Toms, I don't think of them as Tom 1, Tom 2. I think of their personality that they've become. Each of us become bigger than our name. And the name, our personality defines our name versus the other way around. And by selecting a name of a person, Alex, it's a fairly simple name, it's short, sweet, starts with an A, which is really good for TripAdvisor reviews, so top of the list. But apart from that, it's really a name that is a nice name, but comes with no sort of conception of what the personality is, and it's allowed us to have a blank canvas. and create those moments of personality. So by coming in and immersing yourself and having those thoughtful moments all the way through. Simple things like we don't have a traditional reception desk at Alex. So anybody that comes into the lobby, a lot of people think they're coming into the back door because you actually walk in through our little laneway and you actually walk around behind staff that are working on a counter, and there's no desk. So traditionally when you walk into a hotel, there's always a desk and you have staff on the other side. It's a very transactional experience. You're going to a bank, really, you're sort of transacting. What we wanted to do is create a hotel like a home where you actually walk into our space. And at home, I don't stand behind a counter and talk to you. I engage with you, I connect with you, and we sit and chat. So that's what we wanted to do at Alex. So that's right up front. There's a little thoughtful moment, and I love seeing people, just that little moments of confusion where they're like, am I on the wrong side, or why am I doing here? And that's the moment that we're engaging that person, and that person then going through that thought process of, do I like that? Do I like this? Is this right for me or not? It's exactly the same as when people first tried that Little Creatures beer for the first time. Or when you try something new. We might not be conscious of it, but you're always then saying to yourself, hey, is this for me? Do I like this? Am I going to approach this in the right manner? And it's those thoughtful moments that I think connect us with the right demographic. Those that say, yeah, I'm ready for this. Those thoughtful people, and they tend to be a little bit more creative people. People that are actually ready for experience, rather than people that are sort of defined and set in their ways. Because those people I don't think we can ever change, and they're probably the most difficult people. So if people say, well, what's your demographic that you're approaching at Alex, for example? Who do you want to come and stay? And we say, well, it's an attitudinal demographic. It's not a corporate person, it's not a leisure person, it's not an international traveller, it's not a lawyer that's coming to visit in town in ties. It's more someone, they can be any of those people, but it's a question of whether they're ready for thought and they're engaged and they're interested. And it's those thoughtful moments, how well they perceive those, and if they're ready to be shocked, I suppose, in those simple, very minor ways that we can bring that into hospitality. We don't want to get your heart racing and be scared, but we do want you to be challenged a little bit, and then by that you sort of define on who we are. So we've been open for 5 months, and I think what's really nice and what we see now coming into our little hotel, and people are coming into Perth, there's a huge amount of people that are ready for something different, are engaging in that, and actually want to make that point of difference to come into the hotel. And particularly in Perth too, we're pretty lucky. It's a great little location, and in fact Marcus Canning, ages ago when I talked to Marcus about the hotel, Marcus drew this little intersection of lines, and this 2-axis, and we talked about Northbridge and the cultural centre, and we put Alex right in the middle of the 4 lines, and we think it's a fantastic location, and it's the growing sort of heart of the city, where Yogan Square is going to go. We've got the emerging William Street creative areas, Northbridge changing face, and I think we're so lucky in Perth and unique in the world to have all our cultural icons in one little great area. So the State Gallery, Pika, Blue Room, State Theatre, all in one spot, and they're our neighbours at the hotel. Then we've got the CBD, which I walked today, and it literally took me 3 minutes to get here. I'm not trying to do a sales pitch here, by the way, but only to paint the picture that the location that we're in, with Northbridge debauchery and then inner city Highgates and all the great little areas around there, where we sit, we're really able to pull in a range of demographics. So we can have the lawyer that's coming into town, or we can have the couple that are out to party for the weekend, or the family that are in town to experience a show together. So we can appeal to a range of people and demographics from that location, and for us it's about what's on the outside. It's just as important as about what's in the inside. And that's breaking that traditional model of a hotel, where a hotel tries to cocoon you and separate you from the outside world and immerse you in their little space. But for us, we want people to engage, and those people that are interested want to know what's on the outside of the hotel, what's in the community, what's in the neighbourhood, and get out and experience that. So we certainly celebrate that, and we hope that then elevates our product to help define our personality.